Okay, so welcome back to session 5 of this little series on thinking about the Holy Spirit. We closed up yesterday when I was talking about the work of the Holy Spirit by just referring to this verse in John 14, verse 7. You know him, Jesus says to the disciples, you know the Spirit, for he lives with you and will be in you. That's a really important distinction. He is with you, he's at the side of you, and he's in you, he's inside you. And actually, Acts and the day of Pentecost add a third preposition there, a third relationship, the Holy Spirit coming upon us. That kind of three-way relationship with, in and on is really important for us to understand. So what does it mean to say the Spirit is with us? Well, the Holy Spirit is active in the world. Right? The Holy Spirit is God's active presence in every area of the universe. When I look up to lofty mountain grandeur and hear the brook and feel the gentle breeze, as the hymn writer says, that kind of sense of there is something of God's presence in creation in the world, that's the work of the Holy Spirit. It's the work of the Holy Spirit who testifies to the existence of God. It's the work of the Holy Spirit who inspires creativity, who inspired the authors of the Bible, who inspires preachers, who convicts you of sin, who draws you to Jesus. That's the work of the Holy Spirit as an external party, if you like, the Holy Spirit with, the Holy Spirit active in the world. And the Holy Spirit is active in the world for non-Christians as well as Christians. The very fact that you are led to Christ, the very fact that there was a time when you came to give your life to him was because of the work of the Holy Spirit with you. He stood alongside you. He whispered in your ear, if you like, metaphorically, and brought you to Jesus. And that moment that you gave your life to Jesus, your relationship with Jesus changed, but your relationship with the Holy Spirit changed as well. Not only was he now with you, but he was also in you. The Holy Spirit is active in the life of the believer. He makes our spirits alive. He works within us to make us more like Jesus, to remind us, as we saw yesterday, of Jesus' teaching, to build the fruit of the Holy Spirit within us. We'll talk about that in the 6th session. The Holy Spirit with, active in the world. The Holy Spirit in the life of the believer. But the Spirit's work doesn't end there. Just as at his baptism the Spirit comes upon Jesus to empower him for ministry, so on the day of Pentecost the Spirit comes upon the church. And that's what we celebrate on the day of Pentecost. And we'll look at this in more detail on Sunday in the Sunday night message. But just to outline this very briefly for you today. In Acts chapter 1, after the resurrection of Jesus, so after the risen Christ still with the disciples, but before his ascension to heaven, Jesus is teaching the disciples. And it says there, Acts 1, 4-5, on one occasion while Jesus was eating with them, he gave them this command, do not leave Jerusalem, but wait for the gift my Father promised, which you've heard me speak about. For John baptized with water, but in a few days you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit. Right? The disciples have heard Jesus' teaching. They've put their faith in him. They saw the empty tomb and they believed. Peter and John went into the tomb and saw the grave closed there. Thomas put his hands in Jesus' side and declared, my Lord and my God. They are believers now. They've given their life to him. They've acknowledged his lordship. They've quite possibly had baptism in water as well. But there's another experience that they haven't yet moved into. And Jesus says, don't rush to get on with ministry. Don't rush to get on with the task of telling the world about me, because you haven't yet got the relationship with the Holy Spirit that you need. You haven't yet got the divine resource to accomplish the task that I have for you. And the New Testament uses the metaphor of being baptized in the Holy Spirit to describe this experience. Just as being baptized in water gets you soaked all over, the Greek word baptizo, the Greek verb literally means to dip under. It's used of dyeing clothes, and if you're colouring clothes, you don't want them to be half coloured. You want them to be fully coloured with the dye. You want to push them under so that some of the material doesn't retain its old shape and its old colour. You want the whole batch of material to be remodelled and reshaped in this new style and with this new design. You baptize, you completely immerse the material. And just as being immersed into water gets you soaked all over, so too the baptism in the Spirit means being immersed in the Spirit. It means being clothed with power from on high, which is another phrase that the book of Acts uses. When the Spirit comes upon you, you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit and you will be clothed with power from on high. There's another very similar saying of Jesus at the end of Luke's Gospel. Perhaps it is literally the same day that these two passages are talking about. Luke chapter 24 has Jesus talking to the disciples, and he says there, I'm going to send you what my Father has promised, the promised Holy Spirit. But stay in the city until you've been clothed with power from on high. Again, the same kind of metaphor. This isn't the Holy Spirit with, this isn't the Holy Spirit in, this is the Holy Spirit upon. This is putting on an outer coat of the Holy Spirit's power and presence in your life. And again, Jesus says, don't rush off to tackle the task of ministry. Don't try and tackle life in your own strength without the empowering presence of the Holy Spirit. Don't wear yourselves out digging trenches with teaspoons when all the power of heaven can be brought to bear on your situation. Use the resource that you have in relationship with the Holy Spirit, because all that resource for living is readily available to us. In Acts 1:8, Jesus says, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. The Holy Spirit comes upon you to empower you for service, to make you a witness, to enable you to testify. Just as the Holy Spirit comes into my life to testify to me about Jesus, so too I'm called to testify to the world about the goodness and the grace and the mercy and the love of God. So all of this is about the church continuing the ministry of Jesus in the same empowering relationship with the Holy Spirit, drawing on divine resource for living. Just as the Spirit came upon Jesus, so the Spirit comes upon the church to equip us for ministry. As I close there, there's a really important distinction that I want to try and make clear to you. Look at those words there that Luke uses. He says, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. Right? He doesn't say that the power is the Holy Spirit. As we've seen, the Holy Spirit isn't just some kind of force or power like that. The power is not the Holy Spirit. The power that comes upon the church is the outcome of God the Holy Spirit coming upon the individual members of that church. That's an important distinction, because what you see in the book of Acts isn't the church with superpowers. It isn't the church on steroids, if you like. It's a church supremely guided by the Holy Spirit, supremely empowered by his presence. It's a church that's learned to understand the difference between the Spirit with and the Spirit in, and has started to experience the Spirit on them too. And what that looks like in terms of the day of Pentecost, we'll unpack a little bit more on Sunday.